Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about why Branded is an excellent option for playing Dragontail in the TCG metagame, and I want to focus mostly on two things. One is how the Branded cards change and improve the Dragontail game plan, and two, why this is going to be different and better in the TCG compared to over in the OCG. If you are new to my channel, I tend to stay away from combos and spreadsheets because that type of content is everywhere on YouTube and does not give you a fundamental understanding of how the game works. Instead, I like to focus on deck theory and game plan. What is the game plan? What are the fundamental mechanics or gimmicks that an archetype revolves around that make it good? Okay, so let's get started. By the way, guys, if you don't know how Dragontail works to begin with, I will put a link to my intro to Dragontail in the description below, which gives you a fundamental understanding of the game plan. I will not be doing a basic card overview in this video, and I will assume that you understand how this deck works at a very basic level. Okay, the most important thing you need to understand before we get into the details of this video is that Dragontail, of all of the Justice Hunters format decks, Dragontail, Yummy, K9, and Vanquish Soul, is the most susceptible to metagame non-engine calls. Okay, let me explain what I mean, and then you'll be able to understand the explanations I give in this video. Retaliating Sea is a card that was very popular in the OCG when Dragontail was much more dominant and much more represented in the early OCG metagame post-Justice Hunters. This card says, when your opponent activates a spell card that includes an effect that special summons a monster's quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. If summoned this way, while this card is face up on the field, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So Retaliating Sea is extremely strong into Dragontail because whenever you use any of your fusion spells, these are spell cards that perform a fusion summon, and therefore your opponent can activate Retaliating Sea and all of your resource economy, instead of going to the graveyard where you want it to go, will be banished instead. So Retaliating Sea, in many cases against many versions of Dragontail, is basically a lose condition. However, here in the TCG, it seems that most people are reasonably sure that Dragontail is going to be the worst of all of the Justice Hunter archetypes. Whether or not this is true is not what this video is about. I think here in the TCG, Dragontail is going to be one of the least represented but most interesting and flexible decks in Justice Hunters. And because I do not think people are going to be playing cards like Retaliating Sea, it means we can build this deck to be the best version of our engine, the best version of Dragontail that we want to play, rather than how do we not lose to cards that people are playing as metagame calls like they did in the early OCG. Okay, that being said, let me now talk about why I think Dragontail is improved by Branded, and I will do this by showing you a few different combos, and then I will look at the deck profile again and give you my final thoughts on this version of Dragontail. Okay, so for the first combo, I want to talk about the most basic possible combo you can do with this deck, and this is either with Branded Opening or drawing Aluber. I'm choosing to play 3 Branded Opening and 1 Aluber because you usually want to be able to normal summon your Lucius, because that will give you an additional search, and it's a strong part of the resource economy. However, you can choose to play 3 Aluber, it's just a different type of deck. So here I'm going to start with Branded Opening. In the draw phase to play around roll, you do have to discard a card, so this is a little bit discard heavy, but that will bring out your Aluber, and the Aluber will search for your Branded Fusion. So here you have a monster on field, and you have Branded Fusion, which is obviously an exceptional card, and usually if your opponent has Ash, they will Ash the Branded Fusion. So now you can go for your Branded Fusion as your first play, and you can dump your Aluber and your Dracotail Mululu, which I guess this is a new name for this. I actually haven't read this before. I don't like this name at all. Anyhow, you're dumping the Albaz and the Mululu. You do have to dump this one because the Lubellion requires a Dark Monster and Fallen of Albaz, and I don't think Albion is particularly good in this version because you don't actually want to banish stuff right now. So anyhow, you can now go Chainlink 1 Mululu and Chainlink 2 Lubellion the Searing Dragon to discard yet another card and go into your first boss monster. So right now you have access to a Mirror Jade, which is still an extremely strong boss monster that is hard for your opponent to clear. So this is a very, very solid start. And now the Dracotail Mululu triggering will be able to set another Dracotail spell or trap, or your first Dracotail spell or trap. So Rahu Dragontail is usually the one you'll want to start with if you don't have other pieces in your hand, because this is the one that gives you the kind of Branded Fusion type effect, where you can fusion summon a Dracotail monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand, deck, or field, but then you're locked into fusion summoning. So now we're going to go for Rahu, and we're going to bring out the Dracotail Arthalion. So here we're going to use a card from our hand because we have to, because this says a Dracotail monster and then 1+ monsters in hand. And the Dracotail monster we're going to use is Dracotail Phimena. Now this one is the one that has the quick effect from hand where you can discard it to fusion summon a dragon or spellcaster fusion monster using monsters from your hand or field. The reason that we're using this one is that we can go 2 chain links, so we can activate the Arthalion, and then we can also activate the Phimena to set a blank Dracotail spell or trap. In this case, I'm going to be setting Dracotail Flame as an example, and the Arthalion is going to be adding back our 5 mana from grave to hand. So this is a basic cookie cutter type line to show you the type of card economy you get from just access to your branded fusion through something like a branded opening or hard drawing the Aluber. Now you can, instead of setting Dracotail Flame, instead go for the other Dracotail spell that will be able to search you for another Dracotail monster. Now you could do that and search for the Lucius and normal summon the Lucius and then continue playing from there, but I want to show it to you this way because this is either branded opening where you don't use your normal and Aluber, or you do actually have to use your Aluber normal summon. And you usually want to add back the 5 mana because then you have multiple ways to play and you have another way to fusion summon out of turn. And then your Dracotail Flame is obviously the interruption you've chosen to place instead of the other Dracotail trap. So this is the super basic card economy. Now let me show you some more realistic scenarios where you're trying to use more cards in your hand to achieve a better type of end board. So for this one, let's say that you are opening something like Rahu and also access to your branded opening. So in this case, you don't need to use your normal summon because you don't have the Aluber, you just have your branded opening, and then you also have the Rahu. This will be kind of discard heavy, so we're again in the draw phase going to bring out our Aluber. That's going to give us the branded fusion. We're doing the same thing here where we're going to dump the Mululu and the Albaz, and then the Mululu is going to trigger along with the Lubellion, the Searing Dragon. So we use another discard, we go into our Mirror Jade, and then we're going to set the Ketu instead of going for a trap because we want to continue playing here. We're not ready to just set our traps and end on a basic board. So now we can activate the Ketu and search for our Lucius. The big difference here is we get to normal summon the Lucius and now search for another monster. So here we're going to search for the 5 mana, so we have this in our hand. And now we can activate the Rahu Dragontail to continue our fusion plays. So here we can dump the Urgula from deck and the 5 mana from hand. It is very important that you use the Urgula instead of the Pan, because this one says if this card is in your graveyard, you can target a spellcaster Dragotail monster in your graveyard, place this card on the bottom of your deck, and if you do, add that monster to your hand. So normally you're going to be adding back the 5 mana because this is the way that you can fusion out of turn. So you always want the Urgula as part of your resource economy. It's a very, very important card to the Dragotail resource loop. So now the 5 mana and the Arthalion can also trigger. We're going to set the Dracotail Flame, and we have the 5 mana added back to hand. But this time we also get the Horn, because we were able to use both the Urgula to set the spell and trap, and also the 5 mana in the graveyard. And the Arthalion, in this case, added back our 5 mana, which means that we can use the Urgula on something else, or the same 5 mana later on in this turn. So now when you end the turn here, you can see that you have both traps, and because you didn't have to use your normal summon on the Aluber and instead you used it on the Lucius, you have many more options here. So now let me show you what happens if you open the Aluber and you have to use your normal summon there. So if you go for the Aluber normal summon, you search for the branded fusion, you still have Rahu in your hand because you've drawn these two cards in combination, but you have used your normal, so you can't go into the Lucius. So now if we do the same thing where the branded fusion dumps the Mululu and the Fallen of Albaz, and that brings out your Lubellion, you can now go into your Mirror Jade, and then you're also going to get access here to your Ketu Dragontail. So your Ketu can search something else. We're going to leave this set for now and just show that you can use your blank in hand to go into your Arthalion and also dump an Urgula. So now you can use the you can add back the Urgula with your Dracotail Arthalion, and the Urgula is going to set your Flame or Ketu, whichever one you didn't set first. Now if you want, you can Ketu into a 5 mana, and you could actually activate the 5 mana here to go into the Gulamel, which this one used to be called Grammel. This name has also changed, and I haven't read this name change before. Anyhow, the Arthalion is not actually useful on field right now. It's more useful for the effect on summon, and then you want something in your graveyard to be able to bring it out later on when the effect is triggered. If 2 or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time while this card is in the graveyard, then you can special summon it. That's just another part of their resource economy. But really it's the Gulamel, which is a horrendous name. Is this really the name? I mean, Grammel was kind of weird to begin with, but whatever. The Gulamel is the one that's a little bit more useful because you get to chain something to it to get another pop on field. So yeah, at this point you could use the Urgula to add back the 5 mana from your grave to your hand, and so you're seeing that you actually have less stuff on the end board. You don't have both traps, you only have one, but you still do have access to your Mirror Jade boss monster, your Gulamel, which will hopefully give you another pop, and then you have another way to fuse with the 5 mana. So I've just shown you with the basic discards, but obviously if you have other cards in your hand, that'll determine the plays that you're actually able to make here. The last thing that I want to show you is fusion deployment. So this card is pretty interesting because it gives you another way to fusion summon with your Cartesia, and that can be quite important depending on the version of Dragontail you're choosing to play. So let's say that we're going to go for a fusion deployment and we're going to bring out our Cartesia here. So we do have to reveal the the Dust Dragon. So we have to play Dust Dragon, and that takes up a slot in our extra deck to be able to do this. But this is quite strong because we can use the Blazing Cartesia to go into an Arthalion as long as we have a Draco Tail monster in rotation. So here, let's say we have the Lucius and then whenever blank monster in hand, we can go into the Arthalion. And even if we were using something like a Lucius, we can just add that back to our hand. So the Lucius will trigger in graveyard to set something like a Rahu, and then we can still add it back off the Arthalion if we, for example, wanted to normal summon the Lucius. So then we could search for our 5 mana or whatever piece was missing, and we still have access to the Rahu Dragon Tail here. So now if we were to go to Rahu, because we still want to end on the Gulamel, Jesus, I really hate the name of this card. Then we get to have this on field as well. And the cool thing here is that when you use your 5 mana and you set your flame, you now set whatever other card you want. Like if you haven't used the Ketu, you can set the Ketu. If you wanted to get both traps here, you could get both traps here. But the Urgula now that you've used because you dumped it off of the Rahu can be used to put the 5 mana back in your hand, and then you still get the Ketu and put some other body in your hand. So in most cases, I really like to set up for the other turn and put something like a Pan in my hand, because this is one that allows me to pop a monster on the field. And also, if you have this in your graveyard, when a face-up fusion monster you control is destroyed, then this has a trigger effect where you can place it on the bottom of your deck and then special summon a non-fusion Dracotail monster from your grave. So the Urgula is more useful on your turn for setup, and the Dracotail Pan is more useful if you think that there's going to be a way to trigger it, especially out of turn. So that's why I'm setting up with that here like this. And then when you look at the field that you're left with here, you have the Pan in hand as one of your materials that the 5 mana is going to use. Even if your entire field was cleared, you'd still have 2 bodies to go into another Arthalion. You're going to have your Gulamel for another type of pop. You're going to have the Blazing Cartesia, which, remember, this one during the main phase can fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as material. So this is a spellcaster in itself, which is kind of useful, and you have like options for things you want to go into. It does have to be level 8 or higher, which means you can't go into something like a Winda if you were to draw a Shadal monster. But there are other cards like Mysterion the Dragon Crown and Secretarian Dragon, and these ones just require a dragon and a spellcaster. They both require a dragon and a spellcaster, so those cards, especially in the mirror, can be particularly strong. And then obviously you always want a way to go into the Dracotail Arthalion. Usually your opponent is going to clear some of your monsters and you're just going to remake the same monster later on, so having some level of redundancy in your game plan is pretty strong. Okay, so that's basically it for going over the branded version of Dracotail. I think that this is a decent version of the deck, and I think that if people are not going to be playing cards like Retaliating Sea, you can definitely play around with this. I will say, if you follow other channels like Metagames GX, they focus more on branded decks that happen to be playing a Dracotail engine, whereas I'm showing you a Dracotail deck that is playing a branded engine. So the ratios that you play with this, if you want to add in tier cards, if you want to add in a heavier Shadal package, there are many, many options, like the King of the Swamp stuff. There's a huge amount of flexibility with Dragontail. I just wanted to show you the super basic branded stuff and how branded can bridge into Dragontail and add more resilience and flexibility into your Dragontail game plan. So if you've enjoyed the video, thanks for watching. Feel free to buy me a coffee if you want to support the channel, or just subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching.